future, but I think I would like to get educated from the other three distinguished panelists.
Based from your recent OPEC, we need a whole of sector and whole of policy approach. You are very right, need financial allocations, human resources, solutions, and very importantly, the clear, if we sort of think this supply chain sustainability in disasters time, how you think that these emerging AI forecasting tools, how these can be integrated into disaster risk management frameworks, how these can be optimized through resource distribution during these emergencies, particularly in those areas, regions which are remote and are very sort of prone to these extreme climatic events such as floods and droughts. So,
yeah, well, thank you very much. Thank you. And you all know that many of us here in the room, I mean, they come from our different background, but I believe and I trust that many of us has been actually at the forefront in Pakistan when it comes to the humanitarian assistance or the disaster control and those areas. And we all know that how critical it becomes for the supply chains to be functional, to remain functional, and the people who are actually struck in the disasters to have the accessibility to them and to reach to them and being able to provide the essential items to them in a speedily manner. And we also know that the supply chains are the very first thing which get affected. And the memories are still fresh from the 2022 flood here in Pakistan, and several of us from other parts of the world as well. What we have seen is that how badly it basically affects reaching out to those populations and those communities in the remote areas. So I think that the challenges which are there, they become really critical. They become really acute in the face of any kind of a disaster. And but the solution actually very much lies within the technology. I think that's what we have not really fully utilized so far. And there are several reasons for that. I'm not really going to go into too much of the reasons for that, but I think looking more into it, what is the potential of the technology in these kind of situations, and how to integrate them, how to include them into any disaster response measures. But just allow me to take a little bit of kind of a step backwards, and that is not only when a disaster has actually hit and we are in a situation of emergency, that's where actually we started looking into it. And I think it starts a way before this, because we need to know what population, what communities, and where the people are located who actually need the assistance, they need the aid, and we need to reach out to them. For that, the data compilation and the risk exposures of the different communities and the different segments that need to be compiled, that need to be collected. And that's where it actually started, because once all this data and the base layers of the data related to the disasters, and then the socioeconomic parameters, and then the population, very strictly population data is available to us. I think with the help of technology, and especially in the age of technology where we're living right now with the AI and machine learning and several other aspects, it can be identified and determined almost in no time that where we need to focus in terms of our assistance, in terms of our support to reach out to those areas. And so the technology is available. Everything actually becomes kind of a secondary that in terms of reaching out. But I think the real fundamental kind of requirement is to have the compilation of all these information and data, and have all the digital technologies to be fully connected. And then once we are in a situation like this, then the communication networks become extremely important. I mean, one experience from 2022 flood was that we have seen a kind of an extreme lack of coordination And it's easy to say that, okay, there was no coordination, the different agencies, they were willing to work together and they were willing to kind of provide assistance and reach out to the remote communities in Balochistan and Sindh. But I think when we go a little bit deeper, the underlying problem is the communication problem. And this is, which is a little bit kind of ironic as well. I mean, these are the technologies which have really evolved and developed in the last 30, 40 years. The communication and information technology, but we have not been able to fully utilize them in a kind of a normal situation, but especially in the disaster situations as well. Pakistan being one of the countries where the mobile phone penetration has been extremely high, and but we have actually kept ourselves so far have kept ourselves to some very fundamental and basic utilization of this technology. And technology is all about integration, it's all about connectivity, and that connectivity has to come from somewhere, and centralization of the communication and data is extremely important. So I think these are the few kind of fundamental kind of challenges, but at the same time technologically not very difficult or challenging, no need to be connected, and that can really put us ahead of some of the challenges which we normally face in an emergency situation like this. So this is what I believe, but I think during the discussion, the next few questions, this discussion is going to be refined a little bit more.
And also how NDRMF employ data analytics, as you have recently formulated this NatCat methodology for de-risking climate smart initiative. These data analytics to evaluate the efficiency of disaster relief supplies and supply chains, and what metrics are used to measure success in ensuring climate resilience, de-risking and sustainability.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. The NatCat is much broader in its scope and much deeper in its applicability. Where we are right now is we are at the very infancy stage of it, but an extremely important stage as well. We have been able to accumulate all the base layers of the data from many different sources. So NatCat is actually rich in the data sources, starting from the satellite imagery and going all the way down to the survey data from different sources, and then having the entire Pakistan's public infrastructure as well as the road networks, the bridges, the schools and the health systems and everything else into it. Despite this kind of a very frequent statement which we hear in Pakistan that access to data and accumulation of the data is extremely important. So we certainly have been able to cross the first hurdle, and that actually already put us on an extremely powerful stage and a state where we can actually build a lot on it. And this is something actually which we are exploring in terms of its applicability, application, utility, and then how far and how deeper we can actually take it. Now our fundamental focus, of course, given the mandate of the organization and DRMF, the fundamental focus, of course, is going to be remained on the disaster risk reduction and analytics, which are very sharply actually built on the disaster losses and the loss estimation, and having all the algorithms and the scientific basis at the back end of it, which actually can give a very realistic and evidence-based picture to a number of policymakers, decision makers, investment decision makers, and number of other players in terms of how they should be making the policies and where the public sector development investment as well as the private sector development investment should be actually moving ahead. So that remains a very fundamental but extremely important aspect of it. But then we all know that the technology and some of the technologies which we're talking here, IoT, blockchain, connectivity, and number of things. This is all about connectivity. This is all about integration of the technologies, and this is all about integration with different data sets, and then making a more powerful, more refined, and more useful utilization of those data sets. So this is a stage on which we are actually embarking ourselves right now. Now, supply chains, and of course, are the extremely important aspects of it. So, and we actually, in our conceptual framework, we are dividing into two aspects of it. The one is which is very much public oriented, and which is related to especially to the remote areas and the communities and the infrastructure, which has traditionally been kind of out of the scope of the many decision makers, as well as the humanitarian workers, a number of other stakeholders. And so that's where our primary focus, at least in the first stage and the first phase, of course, is going to be. Now, the second, of course, is more kind of a commercially oriented. Data is data. That can be utilized for so many different ways. And we realize the importance of it, that if we have accumulated road network in one place under our belts, and similarly we know the status of the communities, the gender and sex oriented disaggregated data in Balochistan, Sindh, KPK and other places, and similarly we know the socioeconomic status of those communities as well. We know the business profiles of some of the stakeholders who might be very much operational in those places, and we can actually connect all those dots, and we can actually provide in a kind of a real time, in a very informative, come up with the knowledge information product to all these different stakeholders. So our system, the NetCat system, basically does is it actually have the different runtime periods, and it can accurately, with a high degree of accuracy and the confidence level, it can actually look into it and provide us the information that what is going to be the impact of the different kind of disasters, and that is based on some of the information from the last 70 or more than 100 years, which actually has been we've been accumulated, and then layering it up with the satellite imagery, and then further actually strengthening from the different climate change models as well, which we're actually seeking information from the climate change model, which actually keep on updating it on a regular basis. So I think this is quite a powerful system, and we are opening it up for the supply chain component of it as well, and where we can actually provide the information and the real-time data information, and then allowing the different stakeholders, especially from the private sector and the others, to redesign and recalibrate their supply chain systems. The beauty of it is that we can run it on different runtime periods, which in some cases, especially flood, which is one of the primary and the critical disaster in case of Pakistan, up to 400 years in advance as well. So, and we can actually change the time as well. If somebody actually do not want to look into the future for too far away, their concern might be only 30 years or 50 years, and that can be done, of course, a lot more accurately rather than 400 years. But then if we are designing the policies in this year planning or water resources or other places, of course, they should be looking to more 100 and 200 years time period, and that's how they actually should be designing and formulating the policies, and then directing the investment towards that direction as well. So I mean, this is a kind of a overview picture of the system which we have been able to put together. It's up, it's functional, and anyone actually can go and request for a login details request, and then have access to the system from NDRMF website. And then it gives you, depending who you are, if you're coming from a government institution, of course your access actually goes much deeper. If you are researcher in a university or some other academic institution, and then it gives you some more precise kind of information and more refined information which you can actually switch into your research for your research purposes, and similarly others. So we have actually laid it up with different access rights and different categorization of the different people and institutions who can have access.
What is different? What do you think that is the way forward?
If the colleague in the pink shirt is then listening carefully, then we know.
Yeah, and policy framework in terms of government or policy makers being the facilitator, or how we can have private sector to jump into this digitalization sort of framework, particularly talking about the disasters and climate vulnerabilities. So over to you.
I think what we're discussing, what Larry Sab said, and what my friend Sobia actually mentioned, is the digital divide is actually very real. And the reality of it actually hits our faces when we are in a situation of emergency, when we're in a situation of a disaster or anything like this. And then when we see that, okay, the people in the communities and in the remote areas, how disadvantaged they are. And then we start actually realizing that the kind of the role of the government, which should have been there in terms of the facilitation, in terms of making sure that those kind of technologies, accessibilities, the digitalization is not going to be reaching to those corners of the country because it's just not commercially viable for them. The profit motivation is not strong enough, and so it's just not going to happen. But then the states and the governments this is the primary responsibility of them, and they are the last insurers, they are the last kind of providers of the technologies or other necessities as well. So I think, but then we also know that what other governments have been actually trying to do, especially what Solari Sahab said, that kind of venturing themselves into the business, that has never been actually been successful. And this is not only related to Pakistan. We have seen historically as well in all over the world, the different models have been applied, but actually they all are kind of settling down that, okay, the private sector can actually play much bigger and better role, and similarly leave it to those who can do this kind of a job, and they can do much better, much more efficiently. So the government has to understand its role, and understanding in this particular context is restricting themselves, limiting themselves, and losing grounds, and which is a big ask for this particular government in Pakistan or in general, and other countries as well. So, but nevertheless, I think when it comes to facilitation, can be kind of defined in so many different ways, and because the facility, by the name of the facilitation and the mechanism of the facilitation, actually they have to make sure that those who are being left behind, they are brought into the ladder, and just we're talking about drone. This is you're all a lot more technologists than myself, but then look at the smartphone, and I think we have not really been able to counter the promotion and the advertising of iPhones and Samsungs, which are extremely expensive, and that's where the economic divide is actually making the digital divide a lot more cruel, a lot more sensitive actually, and then of course it has all the other political and other kind of implications as well. So I think the technology is there, it's tested, the proof of concept is there. A smartphone can be manufactured, can be designed, can be produced on a much cheaper way as well, at a much more affordable prices as well. And this kind of a facilitation could have been done by the governments actually a lot earlier than just kind of sitting and waiting for the private sector to come, because some kind of incentivization mechanism has to be introduced. Now, once the smartphone is in the hand, and a number of other players are actually going to come, and they are going to start making the use of it. I'm sure that many of us remember, if not many, but some of us who are old enough, when the mobile phone actually came to Pakistan, and it was under the principle of there was some Solari, what was the name was? There was some kind of a attractive name for it, when the both caller and the receiver actually used to pay 6 rupees. I think it started from 11 rupees, came down to 6 rupees. The both parties are actually paying for it, and the growth actually remained limited for quite an extensive period of time. Now, with a simple change of the rule that only the caller pays, it just blasted, And then we've seen that how the mobile phone penetration actually skyrocketed in Pakistan. And then these kind of leap of faith need to be happen one more time, when we use the utilization of the phone in a lot more effective and a lot more efficient and a lot more useful fashion.